wash my hands. Can you make sure that Cheryl gets on the, I don't know why she got left off in the beginning and then I think it just keeps getting copied and pasted over. Can we make sure it's on the distribution list?
Mia don't love me.
Hello everyone. Cheryl, are you getting emails though?
Cheryl,
Huh?
she asks, are you getting the
committee
emails?
emails?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know why your name is not on the sheets, but you're at least getting the emails.
Yes, I am. Sorry, I'm just getting over a cold now. Stay in the morning.
So, does somebody want to keep time today? Somebody want to help me out? Keeping time?
What are the rules behind it?
So we'll just have, time limits for each section. The approval of the December committee minutes, that shouldn't take more than 5 minutes.
I'll keep the time. Just tell me how much time for each section.
So, 5 minutes for the approval of the minutes. Old business, updates on Vital Brooklyn. We'll give that 5 to 10 minutes. I think we should probably go over what happened with the Empire Boulevard resolution. Let's give that 10 minutes.
Where's that?
It's not on the agenda, but it's under old business. And then we'll have any other committee updates.
And Nostrand Avenue.
Is there anything new on
Well,
Nostrand
we need to
Avenue?
find out what's going on.
I haven't had any news.
Have we asked city planning, has the community
There's
board asked city
nothing-
planning if any application has been submitted, or if there are any discussions, pre-certification
Not-
discussions going on?
Not as far as I know. I've not heard anything.
That doesn't mean that there's nothing happening. That's my concern.
Oh, yeah, so I think
But that's a
Carl
monstrosity that they're trying to.
Yes, and so I think that the committee should ask the Department of City Planning if there's an application that has been submitted, if it's pending, if the applicant has paid it, because you can put an application and it just sits there for a couple of years.
What address is this?
Carl Cohen's property on Nostrand.
So that we can at least, the community can know what's going
The
on.
30-story building?
I mean, we can definitely ask the
Oh,
office to-
it's in the notes, 967 from last time, Nostrand Avenue developer presentation.
Yes, if you can ask the community board to send a letter to the Department of City Planning, just to ask the
Yeah,
status.
the office can do that. I mean,
Can
for that
can the
matter.
committee ask that of the office? That's the question.
I don't think the committee, well, yeah, fine, if you guys wanna pass a resolution on that, that's fine, but they can just do it,
I mean, let's just pass the
It's
resolution, but we
it's
know how
their
that
job
happens.
to pass on anything, and it's city planning's job.
I understand that too, but we know how your community board works.
You know how city planning works too.
Exactly, so you need to put a formal request in from Community Board 9, it needs to come from this committee, asking that an update be given on the application.
All right,
I mean, frankly, okay,
propose-
let me just say this also. In the zoning application portal, right, it should say if something has been filed.
Let's
Well,
just
it
say,
doesn't.
And nothing
I would
has
like to
been
make a
filed.
motion that we ask for,
Okay, first we
information
need
from
to,
city
we
planning
first
on
need,
967
Teresa,
Nostrand Avenue.
can we first approve the December minutes?
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So it's gonna be 5 minutes for the minutes?
Yeah. It's now 7:18, by the way, guys, so it's 20 minutes already. So, can I get a motion to approve the December minutes? Has everybody read them?
I just wanted to clarify something. Because it says that there was a resolution that was passed on item E under section 3, in which it says no with explanation. Somehow, that no with explanation turned into a no with conditions when it got to the community board, and I'm just trying to figure out how did that happen.
Okay, so we'll address that when we get to the next item.
But I'm just making sure, is that correct?
This is
That's all
correct.
I'm asking.
That is
Is the
correct. That's what we
resolution with
voted on.
no with explanation correct? Is that what you guys voted on? That's what I'm asking.
Where does it say that?
Somebody recommend-
So-
This is correct.
Are we all agreed that the minutes are accurate?
I agree.
Yes.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion that we approve the December 10th minutes on ULURP land,
Thank you, Cheryl. Do I have a second? Second from John, okay. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you, the minutes are approved. Okay, let's move on to the Empire Boulevard resolution.
Any minutes for this?
We'll give 10 minutes for this.
Oh, you're the timekeeper? Thank God we have a
I'm gonna
timekeeper.
say something for 2 minutes, and then I'm gonna let everybody else speak for 2 minutes each, up to 10 minutes. Okay, so first of all, I wanna acknowledge that the resolution that we voted on at the board was different than the resolution that is here. I think that in spirit, it was the same, it contained many of the same points that we discussed. But it was different, and I realize that some of you may not be
Wait,
happy.
is there a copy of it that we can look at? Nobody has one.
I might still have one in my handbag somewhere.
But it was changed during the meeting.
It was
Yes,
changed a lot.
It was changed on the floor. I realize some of you may not be happy with that, some of you may like the changes. But it was ultimately voted on in favor by the full board, 23 in favor, 1 abstention, 1 against.
Was the current,
I'm gonna
Was
take,
the
let
rezoning-
me finish, Nicola, and then
You don't have
everybody
to
else.
be rude, you don't have to be rude.
Okay,
You
but
don't have
I
to
said
be
I was
rude.
going to speak for 2 minutes, my 2 minutes is not up, let
Okay,
me
you don't have
finish,
to be rude.
and then the rest of you can speak for 2 minutes, okay?
You do
I
not have to
acknowledge
be
that
rude.
some of you may not be happy with that, I take responsibility for
Uh.
that as chair. If that's something that allows us to move on, I am not happy that our resolution as a committee was rewritten on the floor. I don't want that to happen again. I hope it doesn't happen again. But the way that we can avoid this is by coming to the meetings prepared, having prepared our, by reviewing and reading the zoning materials so that we're not confusing each other when we make proposals. And second of all, come to this meeting, as some of the board members said to me after the meeting where we approved our resolution, come to the meeting in a spirit of collaborative teamwork, that we understand that there are a lot of different viewpoints,
It's okay, yep, that was up.
okay, but work together
okay,
and respect each other's time. That means making compromises,
okay.
Now I'm gonna recognize if anybody else wants to speak.
I would like
on
to speak.
this. Okay, Nicola?
Okay. I thought that meeting, as contentious as it could have been, I thought it went pretty well. We came to a point where we wanted to, we came to a resolution with wording that we were all comfortable with. We also wanted it to be worded in a way that the community board members that don't fully have a background in zoning, were not necessarily at this meeting, could wrap their heads around and understand the logic and the reasons why we voted the way that we did. So we kept it concise, we kept it in a way that There were no questions about why we voted the way we did. And we specifically spoke about no with an explanation, and why we did not want it to be no with conditions. And from what I saw in that meeting, that was never discussed. And the people in that room don't understand the reason. All they knew was, okay, we voted no. They don't understand no with explanation, no with conditions. It was not discussed. The fact that you are now overriding our decision was not presented to that community board. So they did not know what they were signing off on. Making a couple whereases, I was all right with that. I didn't always agree with what you did, but I could live with it. Changing our decision is a problem. And there's nothing that you can say, well, explain why that happened.
It makes what we did look something.
Anybody else? Esteban?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole process of coming up with the resolution to begin with was unacceptable in every possible way. I've never seen anything like it. The emails that were going back and forth and it was a mess. It was a mess, and we've never had this happen. So we have to figure out how we can communicate and actually talk about this stuff, because there's not enough time in these meetings to really get into it. And as far as the board, I mean, it's very telling that they would, that they change what we're doing. They don't, not only do they not have the expertise, but they don't spend the time that we do in here, and it's a waste of our time to come in here and do something that they're gonna turn around and just by the seat of their pants change a resolution that we'd spent, again, all this time via email and via in person.
But it was presented to them, so they just signed off on what was presented to them as an option.
Right, so I mean, I think it's incredibly disrespectful, and it makes me wonder what the point of us being here is.
Exactly.
Anybody else?
It might be helpful in the future, maybe if we could explicitly vote, at least try to, because that's when I'm talking a little bit forward looking, like explicitly vote, like no with conditions, yes with conditions, or yes. So that's like on the record, because like no with explanation isn't like something you can input into the zoning portal. So making sure whatever we write here is directly one-to-one aligned.
That's not true.
It's
That's not
no,
true.
and the
It's a no.
explanation is an upload.
Sorry, I'm
It
trying
was a
to,
straight load.
I'm
It was a
trying-
no.
yeah,
Just
I'm
say
trying
that.
to,
Yeah, I
Sorry.
understand you. Sorry to just interrupt you.
no. I think that might be helpful though, just to make sure we're all aligned in the future. And also to Esteban's point, like I think figuring out like maybe some best practices for like online communication would be really valuable. Like we had, I think, 3 or 4 different email threads at one point, which I don't think did anyone any favors. So maybe that's something else we could try and think about, is how best to communicate online in addition to in these meetings, so we can have a clear thread of conversation.
I just want you to know that it's a violation of the open meetings law for you to be conducting business via email threads that are not privy to the public. So I just want you to know that. So if you start making rules about that, it will get challenged. You're not allowed to do that. I know that this kitty committee does that. I don't say anything. I let it happen. But I'm not gonna let a formal process happen where there's an agreement that you're gonna communicate business via email. That I will stop.
Well, you are right that we are not allowed to vote by email. We need to vote.
You're not allowed to
In
have
public,
intimate discussions
in a
about a topic.
We
as
are
well.
allowed to do committee work online. We are not allowed to vote, so you should all keep that in mind. Okay, anybody else? Teresa?
Yeah, having been at all the meetings, I just wanna emphasize that this committee did vote no with explanation, and I believe what passed with no with conditions, and I didn't, and I don't think the people on the board at the meeting that voted understood that there is a great deal of difference in this decision. No with conditions is very different from no with explanation. And I think that that should have been presented to everybody, like how that plays out as it goes down the line in the decision making with city planning and with the city council and final decisions. It wasn't clear. And I believe that whatever was sent out needs to be changed to no with explanation, because no, it's a no, it's a straight no that cannot be changed to a yes. No with conditions apparently can be changed to a yes as it goes down through the process. So I'm pretty upset about that. So I think it's very important for me to represent my community, because I know they wanted no with explanation as well as this committee. So we have to fix that.
why was it changed? I can understand that the board didn't understand it, but it was presented to them with that change, so why was that changed? Why did you and Fred change it?
As I said, I was I agreed to the no with explanation. What I heard from Fred was what Matt said, which is that it's not possible to upload no with explanations. It's either no or no with conditions, and they chose to make it no with conditions.
We've been down this path. We had the same argument when it came to the armory. Fred knows that, and he knows how he could upload it
Yes, and
with an explanation, which is to upload the
Okay,
document.
so I'm
So
not
I
sure
want it to
that-
be no with explanation.
Okay, so that's
Looks like
fine.
everybody voted.
Okay, so
And
that's-
I would like to make a point before you start talking, Susan, because you've already had your 2 minutes. Let's just be clear what we understand. On the form, there is a specific form, and there's only 4 choices that you can put in. You can put no, you can put no with conditions, you can put yes or yes with conditions. You can attach anything to that form. So that means you can attach an explanation for why you did something, you can attach the conditions of why you something, and this is how it goes. You fill out the form, you attach whatever you want to attach to it, and then it moves forward. However, what happens when it gets to the Department of City Planning, the city charter specifically said there's only 3 considerations you must take into consideration. And that is a yes with conditions, a yes, and a no. So the no automatically flips to a yes with conditions if you are going to include the conditions. The explanation is just an explanation. A lot of times our public officials always act like, oh, you always say no, but you never tell us why. The explanation is telling you why. That's what it does. And so you know this, Fred knows this. And so instead of keeping the no with explanation where you're just attaching it, you change it to a no with conditions, knowing that by the time it gets to the city council, it becomes a yes with conditions, with everybody believing that the community board said yes to this application based upon some conditions that they will never, ever consider. They never consider the conditions. And that is a fact. So you did this on purpose. You and Fred did this on purpose. And now we're all screwed with a decision that most of the community board members don't even understand.
Okay, are we, Cheryl, I think we're at 7:30 now.
We got 19
Okay.
seconds, so.
So,
I have a quick comment.
1 minute, Esteban.
Is there anybody that's gonna be at the borough president's hearing tomorrow that can tell them that this is what happened? Because I think it's important that they know.
I'm gonna go off my own testimony, which is different than the board's recommendations, but I'll include the board's recommendations and provide that insight.
Should you be the representative when you're against what we wanted? I don't know about that, I mean,
Then you're welcome to go.
Everybody
I just found out about it.
Everybody is
I'm just
free to
saying, you-
go and to offer their own testimony. But let me just say that in my experience, nobody else is really interested in all of this internal politics and back and forth. What they wanna see is affordable housing, height limits, density limits, infrastructure, affordable commercial space. These are the things that people actually want. They're not interested in
And
your
that's why
committee
we voted
politics.
no, because that is not what is included in this project as currently
Okay,
designed.
and let me just say that I'm looking at the official application portal now, and it says no with conditions. There's no such thing as it being flipped to a yes. If you all are not happy that it says conditional unfavorable, if you wanted to say unfavorable, then, you can propose that resolution and we can vote right now. Then
No,
we
it
go
should
to
say
Fred
no.
and we ask
That's
them
how
to
we
change.
voted.
We already
Unfavorable.
voted that, no.
Okay,
That's what we
so
voted.
then, I agree, but we're moving on.
Can I make one quick thing, Suki?
Yes.
Cheryl, whoever else, if you wanna write something, I will read it word for word at the borough president's meeting. And you can see the live stream, I'm more than happy to do that as a offer of good faith, if that is helpful at all.
I don't think we're allowed to represent the board, any of us. An individual
No,
member
but
is
I
not
can-
allowed to represent a board
Yeah, but I'll
position at a hearing like that.
read comments from whoever collectively wants to submit them, I'm more than happy to do that. If you wanna send me whatever in writing, I'm happy to read it out loud.
You can also submit written testimony,
Yes.
that's
Yeah,
fine.
You can't submit written, we can write our own.
But even as committee chair, I do not represent the committee when I testify, I represent myself, just so you guys know. Okay, so moving on, the borough president's hearing is tomorrow. They're also hearing 2 other applications that are for very similar zoning, C8 zoning districts. So it's worth going to see what happens. We have the Atlantic Avenue rezoning, which is a big one. Do you want to say anything to the other members about that, just to give people some
Are
background?
we timing this?
As to,
Or-
yeah, we're giving like, I don't know, 5 minutes to this update.
Yeah, I mean, I was part of that process for the last 2.5 years, and it was very telling the way that the process unfolded. It was supposed to be community-led, it was supposed to be based on a previous 8 years of downtown rezoning that they tried to do, where they were trying to do manufacturing, like preserving manufacturing jobs, and then also affordable housing. The community board believes they got screwed by city planning, even in the middle of this supposedly community-led process. They're not happy about it. Really, nobody's happy about the way that it turned out. It was supposed to be better than MIH, but it actually ended up not really being better than MIH. And I think it's pretty instructive as to like the amount of money and time and effort that was put into that. Even whether or not the council member was doing it in good faith, I don't really think matters at this point, because they got. Once you get to the level of city planning, they don't really care at that point. Like the council member has the vote, but they're not gonna honor the things that they've said that they were gonna honor in that context. So I think it's very instructive for us to pay attention to that, because it's how they're gonna be wanting to do land use for the next for the foreseeable future. So that's my.
Yeah, and
So it's the same thing as history repeats itself.
And I actually do completely agree with you that if you want to process for better than MIH, there needs to be a mechanism other than MIH, and that's something that we may want to talk about, how exactly we want to do that. I mean, we need actual language for that. So, you know, if we can work on that. So another thing I wanted to bring up was the Arrow Linen rezoning in Windsor Terrace. Again, this is a similar situation. Former industrial site, very large. I think it's about 60,000 square feet. It's currently an R5 zoning, so very low density. The developer was requesting an upzoning to R7-1. 2 13-story buildings, very similar to this rezoning. And the community was extremely opposed. It has gone through the process. The borough president's recommendation was that he was willing to go with a shorter, bulkier building, but not actually reduce the density. He doesn't want to reduce the number of units. And there was a hearing on the 9th at the city council subcommittee on zoning and franchises. And of course, this is one of those where hundreds of people from the community came out and testified, many of them opposed. And so we had people saying things like, KPK, the local resident, says she advocates for amending the proposal to R6A zoning with at least 40% affordable. They think that if they're exploiting MIH and spot zoning laws leading to tenant displacement. There's another guy who says Catholic Charities made a market rate offer for 100% affordable housing, which Arrow rejected. And Arrow, by the way, in their testimony, said that the pipeline for waiting for the funding for affordable housing is way too long. So that doesn't work for them. He urges them to amend the application, says an R6A could provide up to 124 apartments at 9 stories, doubling the number of affordable units compared to Arrow's proposal. So just to let you know that these kinds of discussions are going on across the city. Residents are saying very similar things to us, but there are a lot of headwinds. Like I said, the developers are claiming that the affordable housing financing pipeline takes too long. They're not willing to sell to these nonprofits that can do 100% affordable housing. So you know, yes, we can want what we want, but there are a lot of things, headwinds that we need to fight. Catherine?
When they say it takes too long, did they specify what is taking too long or what the actual holdup is for affordable housing?
What I've heard is that there's just not enough funding, so like I was told there's like 10 years worth of projects in the pipeline. You know, I don't know if anybody else has heard anything different.
Yeah, I think that the city allocates a certain amount of money each year, so that gets spent every year. And then the organization in charge of actually reviewing the applications is understaffed, so that slows things down worse. So if they don't have enough money, they don't have enough staff to make everything affordable.
Some of it is also, okay, so we're out of time, so we're moving on, Vital Brooklyn. So let's take like 5 to 10 minutes. Does anybody have any updates they want to give on Vital Brooklyn? Is there any community members who have heard anything? Have you guys been in touch with elected officials?
Wasn't the community board, didn't we vote for the community board to send letters?
We did, and I just spoke to Mia. She said the letter has been drafted. She's not sure if it's been sent out yet. She said Dante was on the phone with someone from the AG's office. So something's happening. We don't know what yet. Yeah, so have you guys been in touch with elected officials? Do you know, have you heard anything?
I don't hear anything from Brian Cunningham's office,
Okay.
so.
And are you guys watching the building permits to see what's going on?
They did not do a final EIS yet, so they only did a
Oh.
draft.
I see.
They have not done a final,
Okay,
so.
okay,
I
so
don't know
that's
what's
good news. So
going on.
when?
And no one from, the environmental responded back, so.
When are you expecting to see a final EIS? Is there some sort of deadline or schedule? You don't know. Okay, so that's something we need to keep an eye on. And also, just in case anybody is interested, the controller did come out with a report on housing for the mentally ill homeless. You don't have to agree with everything, but it is very in-depth, so it's worth reading. Apparently, it does acknowledge that housing is very important for getting the mentally ill off the street, but also that the issue is not necessarily that there aren't enough units. There are enough supportive housing units to house street homeless people, but for various administrative and, regulatory and funding reasons, it's not getting to them. So it's worth looking at that to understand what's going on.
Can you send me the report?
Yes, I will.
Well, what about the letter?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Is there anything that we would need from the AG because I have contact with their real estate people that I connect with?
We had asked them to give an opinion on whether or not there would need to be a public hearing before the deed reverter is waived, and how they, we wanna know how they intend to waive it. What are they gonna do? Are they gonna go before the city council? Is there gonna be a public hearing? What happens? Because they have to waive the deed reverter before they can move forward. Or they have to determine that this qualifies as a hospital use.
I'll check in with them.
Okay, thank you, Esteban. So I will continue to follow up with the office to make sure that letter is sent. And you all should continue to follow up with your elected officials on the same question.
They didn't answer my first email during the, November 30th hearing, public hearing. No one answered it. They said they will not go forward with the final EIS until everyone has sent in a written, response is answered. No one has been answered, so I don't know what's going on.
So the next section is community concerns. We'll give
How much time?
20 minutes to that. Okay, Alicia?
I really have concerns about this land use committee. I've drawn the concerns way back in the beginning about it being a predominantly white board. And now my concerns are even deeper in the way in which the chair of this committee is handling the business of the land use committee. The really obnoxious and egregious behavior of taking a vote that was voted and then presenting it to the community board and changing it in that process is egregious. And I believe that the chair should be removed from the land use committee because of this behavior. But this is not the first time. This is the problem. This is not the first time. In June, a framework was passed at the community board level. I have been attending the land use committee meetings every month. Never heard anything about some framework. And all of a sudden, a detailed framework about our suggesting that the median heights of our community should go from a 3-story buildings, which is our average height in our community, to 9 stories, was then pushed into the community board for a vote and then rapidly voted upon. There was no hearing, there was no discussion at the land use committee. The land use committee did not approve it, and yet Suki pushed it, and Fred supported that push. So now we have a land use policy that the community doesn't know anything about, and neither does the members of this board, of this land use committee. These are egregious behaviors. We are supposed to trust the process that this happens. When this committee makes a vote, when this committee looks at policies, we're expecting that their voices are what's recorded and presented. We do not expect for a chair to unanimously, either the chair of a community board, Fred, or a chair of a land use committee, Suki, can then just present a land use policy and say that it's our policy, and no one ever looked at it. So I want to know, how did that happen, Suki? How did the June land use policy get presented to the community board and it never went through this land use committee, never went through the housing committee, never went through any committee of this community board? That is not how community boards are supposed to function. And I believe that Suki needs to be removed as the head of this land use committee, because this is what she does. My ancestors are Native American, and we used to call that white men who talk with forked tongue. You say one thing in one space, you say another thing in another space. Suki, that is you. You talk with forked tongue. You say in this committee, you know what their determinations are, and then you go behind the committee's back and then do something else that you want to do, without conferring, without getting any support, without even getting permission or approval. You are your own power.
Alicia,
You believe you are your own power along with Fred. You two believe that you can control everything in our community, and nothing has to go through our committees. Everything could just be done because this is the will, this is your will. She needs to be removed, and there needs to be a motion on the floor for her removal from this land use committee.
Your 3 minutes.
That's my concern.
Your 3 minutes is up. Are there any other concerns from the community? Okay, so let me speak to our zoning resolution, which was passed in June of 2024, again, almost unanimously. I'm gonna just read it. It says, in bold, zoning plans must consider each block and each community individually and in detail. It then says, in bold, height limits should be calibrated to the context of the community. For blocks characterized by a consistent streetscape and similar height buildings, this means infill buildings should be the same height. For blocks with a mixed context that includes some taller apartment buildings as well as small homes, infill developments should not exceed the 50-foot height of the majority of buildings in Community District 9. Where viable buildings of historic interest were purchased and demolished within the last 20 years, new housing should match the heights and densities of demolished housing. In all instances, but particularly for large full block developments or blocks without an established context, because they consist mostly of vacant lots expected to be redeveloped, shadow and visual impacts and light, air, and privacy for nearby properties, sunlight-sensitive public resources should be considered in determining the appropriate heights and
A motion on the floor to change it, and Jakob seconded me, but Fred said no. So you can see it in the minutes, you can hear it in the minutes, I did it. And Fred said, no, you can't, too late, and people said, no, it's too late, even though I had a second, so I did. You can hear it, if you listen.
I don't recall that.
I do.
Because you actually wanted to put some of these amendments in.
I did, but at the end, I said, this isn't what, the difference between, with the conditions. It
Right,
wasn't
but-
right, and I did make a motion, and somebody said, are you
Right,
making a
but
motion? I
Teresa,
said,
we are-
yes, and
Teresa,
Jakob
we
said I
had-
seconded
Teresa,
it.
Whereas
voted
is
to-
one thing,
We had
as I go
voted to
back.
vote.
No and no with
Nicola,
conditions
let me
is a
finish.
completely different.
Nicola, let me finish. We voted to put the substitute resolution on the floor. Jakob voted against it, and you voted for it, Teresa.
But I did put another motion on the floor and it was ignored.
Because the board had already voted once to vote on the substitute resolution. You had your chance to vote against it, and you didn't.
But I think myself and the others there weren't
They didn't know
aware.
what was going on.
Yeah, exactly.
In that meeting.
I
You
feel
should
great.
say as
Members
you all, you're
didn't
double
understand.
talking.
That you were changing the vote and recommendation of the board, of the committee.
Cause I did
It's one thing if
express
you wanna
that.
elaborate, it's another when you actually change what our decision was, and that's what happened. And that's the problem. I didn't like it, but I was willing to go along with adding some context. But then you changed what we asked for, which was a no. We
Yeah.
voted against that rezoning, and that's not what it was, that's not what is being recorded
Okay, so
in the
Teresa, was
system.
there a reason you didn't make a motion on the floor to amend that?
Why are
Because
you
the-
worrying about her
Let me
motion?
finish, Alicia. The entire committee of the board spent 2 hours going over that resolution line by line. Was there a reason
They
that
didn't
during
go
that
through it line by
process?
line, they were busy asking for parking, they were talking about affordability, they were going off on so many
And
tangents,
that's
so
what
they
they
don't
care,
understand, that's why
what
we
they
were trying to
care-
keep it
because
simple.
that is what they care about, Nicola.
But
and they
that's
have
why
the
we were
right
trying to
that.
keep it, and that's fine, but this was a zoning.
Okay,
And we
so
didn't talk about
Teresa,
zoning,
it's-
did you
so
present
Teresa,
to them
did
what
you-
they were actually
so
asking
Teresa,
for in
is there a
that,
reason that you did not put a motion on the
I
floor
did put a
to
motion.
change it to no with explanation?
You
No,
she
that's
said she
very
did,
fine.
and she
I
said
did.
she did,
I
and she
tried to.
said it was second, and Fred said no.
Very
You already
few
heard.
people understand the nuance
Yeah, I
between the
agree.
two.
That
They
is-
thought they
that
were
should have
voting
been-
no.
That should have been clearly
Can you
explained.
explain to us in what instance in the past it has changed the final outcome that the council member voted to approve, that somebody voted no with explanation instead of no with conditions?
Armory.
It's in
or
the
just
record, the
no?
armory makes it look like we voted
The armory.
with conditions when we voted no. Outright no. The chair voted no,
Okay,
and it was
But I'm
entered
asking you
in
if-
incorrectly.
but I'm
Now,
asking
it's
you
for the
if-
record, I don't care what happens in the end. I'm not saying that, oh, suddenly the sky's gonna open, but I want it to be
Exactly.
on the record that we voted no.
Right.
Outright no. Not no with conditions to make it seem like, oh, if you do these things, then we're gonna be in support of it. Cause we know that's not gonna happen.
Right.
We want a no.
Yes.
We do
Yes.
not
Let me
support
tell
this
you what- let
rezoning.
me-
You want, cause as of
Yes.
right, they could do what we wanted. Most people were like, we want love to have commercial across that whole lot. That's what Yakov was like, give us commercial. And we were all like, yes, give us commercial. That's what we want there. If you want residential, have that it on Sullivan. But do not break the commercial zone on Empire. Have at it on Sullivan, because you know what? We all know, because we've been living here in Brooklyn and we've been living in this community and we've been dealing for it. There's no way they're gonna put deeply affordable housing units of any
Thank you.
quantity
Thank you.
a
Thank
block
you.
in front of Prospect
Yeah.
Park.
Thank you.
It's not gonna
Thank
happen.
you. Thank you.
So put 13, 40-story buildings, it's not gonna be affordable to this
Okay,
community.
and
That's
that
right.
was
And that's why we voted no.
And that was also why we had members at the general board meeting who asked us to specifically state that we wanted 40% of AMI housing or lower. And we had a member put forward the suggestion that it be a minimum of 30%. That was accepted by everyone.
And that's lovely, put it in there as one of the reasons why
We say no.
we decided in our committee not to go into detail, if I remember correctly. Cause it was like, there's so many ways, who knows what could come of it. The bottom line is that what is being presented does not provide the affordability that we need in this community. We don't need just random units, we have units, we need units affordable to this
Cheryl, are we
community.
at time for this
Yeah,
section?
17 seconds, so you.
General
Yeah,
board was
that's
not
fine.
part of those conversations.
Actually, I think someone else will try to ask a question back if you want.
For the sake of time, y'all can go ahead.
So I just, it shouldn't have to do this, but, I think I wanna make a motion, if I can right now, that what we vote on in this committee is exactly what is presented to the community board, whether or not anybody agrees with it in that process, but they have to be presented what we did here. If we're not doing that, then there's no point of us being on this committee.
Wow.
So I make a motion that we do
Yeah,
that.
we completely
And,
agree.
and Esteban, that what the original resolution was presented,
It was
and the
not.
it was read out. You can watch that on video. I read out the original resolution. I said that it was the resolution our committee came up with, and a substitute resolution. I subsequently said that there is a substitute resolution. Somebody else made a motion to put that forward. That motion was seconded by a second person, and there was a vote on it. And the
So
vote was
somebody
in
else
favor.
did a
Is there a
resolution
substitute
for the
committee?
I
committee.
was
Is there
gonna
a substitute
say-
committee?
And
Well,
was there
okay.
rationale as to
But-
why a substitute resolution
Resolution
was
was-
presented?
Yeah,
And cause what I remember, I don't remember you actually refreshing their memory on what was being proposed as the project. What was the zoning? Cause that's what we're voting on,
Right.
rezoning. There was no discussion about the actual zoning, from what I remember. We got into affordability, and we got
Yeah.
into all the details of the whereases, which is what we were trying to avoid, because we know that the board doesn't know all the nuances. So we're like, keep it simple, keep it straightforward. It's not gonna provide the affordability that we need, so we vote no. Give us commercial, fine. And we don't want it to be above a certain height, because that would be out of context. That's what I remember us voting on. And we kept it simple because we didn't wanna get into all of the additional conversation and confusion, which is what ended up happening. But what I don't remember them discussing was the actual zoning that they were voting for or against. Was that discussed?
Yes, we did discuss that the developer was presenting 13 stories. Somebody specifically asked me to explain the differences between the different heights that he saw being tossed around, that the developer had said 13 and our original resolution said 9 and this substitute resolution was saying 6. He said, can you explain all of that?
And did you
And
discuss
where
as
did
of
the
right?
substitute
What was as
resolution
of
come
right?
from? Did it come from a committee? I mean, you're having a resolution, right? A resolution comes from a committee. You now have a substitute resolution to the land use committee resolution. Where did the substitute resolution come from? Who made it up?
There were
What committee
there
came
were
from?
two, like Fred wrote the first one that was just like there on the table. Let me
So
show
Fred
you.
wrote the resolution to the land use
He
committee?
wrote one, no, he wrote one. Are you talking about the Franklin Avenue one?
Yeah, I'm talking about
Yeah,
the front.
Fred, we had the one that we came up with, the short one.
Mhm.
And then Fred presented one at the full board meeting, it was on the table, but then we didn't have quorum. So then when we had the other meeting, there was a next one that Suki worked on, and I saw the other
So
one.
Suki works on her resolution, Fred works on his resolution, and that's what gets
Okay,
presented
I had a
again,
number of committee
again.
members tell me that they wanted it, including Teresa.
Yeah, I
the
had the shadow part.
She wanted that added. Joshua had some changes that he wanted.
Matt,
My,
you talked
but
to
my,
Max.
okay, so I have a question as to, first of all, how it was presented. The amended, the amendment, whatever, that one I did not get, so that was something I had to ask about, because we were already talking about this as if this was the committee decision. And I think when you present information to a large group of people where we don't get this intimate setting, we are being misled. And it's very disheartening. I almost didn't come today, and I'm glad I did, because let me find out we're misleading information. That's going to be a problem, because our duty here is to serve community information in its rawest pure form. And if we're not doing that, then we're not doing our jobs. And so what I'm saying, why did we not just amend the original motion that you guys had came to as a committee, and then we could have added our input based on what you guys had already spoke about? Because we added to an amendment now that was spoken about between whom? And now this is documented that this is something that we all agree upon, but we're not knowing the sources of this information and who's crafting it and what it's insinuating now that it's in a formal form.
Okay, so Catherine, my understanding is that procedurally,
Catherine, my name is Jolie.
I'm sorry, Julie, my understanding is that procedurally, Fred had come to me suggesting a substitute resolution that included more of the explanatory language, which I took out during the process of this hashing out amongst the committee members, which by the way happened after the committee meeting, which is not really supposed to happen, but it did. And you know, some of that got taken out, Fred put some of that back in, there were some other things that got introduced that had to be taken out again. Okay, so the point was that procedurally, if somebody puts a substitute motion on the floor, we then need to vote on that, and we have a choice of voting it down or voting to vote on that. Right, so yes, we could have amended the original motion instead of amending the substitute motion, but once the substitute motion was on the floor, and, you know, Fred was going to put that,
Fred was
was
not supposed
intending
to
to
submit
put
a
a motion
resolution on
on-
the floor. He's the chair of a community
Fred
board.
was intending.
He's supposed to be extremely neutral. He is not supposed to take resolutions. He's not supposed to create resolutions for committees, and he's not supposed to present it because he has too much power. There are rules
Alicia, you're not
against
supposed
that.
to interrupt somebody
Well, I
who's
am
speaking.
interrupting you because you are now sitting here talking about a resolution
Let-
that Fred put on that was unlawful from its inception. He should not be overriding this committee's decisions and creating his own resolutions as the chair of a community board. He has too much power as a community board.
Okay, it's
He presents it, he says, I am the chair, I'm presenting this resolution. It gives everyone the impression that he has the power to do that. He's supposed to stay neutral. It is not his job to
Or
create
I
resolutions.
Do I have a
think-
motion on?
Yeah, I was
Right.
just gonna say, Esteban has a motion on the
Yeah.
floor.
Can I ask a quick question for the folks from the community board that are here? Did you know explicitly that there was a resolution that the committee came up with and a separate resolution and that those were separate?
They were issued out separately. There was the one that you guys had crafted was in our packet, and then there was the substitute motion additionally. That was the one that I did not get. I don't know when it was passed
And then
around.
there was Brad's in there too.
Right, so, but did the committee know that they were voting on different, or that these were different resolutions?
I think where it went wrong was the source of this second document. I think we should have definitely said
Fred has raised
where
his-
it was coming from.
And it should not have come from
And I
Fred, he's the
think
chair.
that would have framed it differently, because to our assumption, we just know a second amendment is being made that's more in depth. We're not knowing who is creating this, if this is a private conversation you guys are having an email, you know, which sometimes happen. I get it. It's hard to get a lot done in these hours. So we don't know where this other document is coming from, and that's where it should have been expressed. Because then we would have known.
I typically like to let the committee work through its stuff, but I think that it's important that there's some context added to this. So the committee, and first of all, I wanna say thank you for the work that you do. Because I definitely understand these are not easy issues that you're dealing with. So I thank you for that. What ended up happening was, and I understand that there were a lot of conversations and a lot of hand-wringing about the resolution. You came out with a resolution that said no, and there were two other pieces of that resolution that were included as part of that. The issue that comes up is that as the chair, I've got to go and represent the board after that. And what our experience is that if you don't give more than that, other people will fill in gaps in terms of what you wanted or didn't want, and they negotiate on the other side. So what was important to happen was that there is some conversation that's included as part of our resolution about this is wrong, and this is why we believe it's wrong, because we don't think there's enough affordability, because we think that if you're gonna do something like that, it shouldn't be any more than 2.0 FAR. And a number of the other conditions that were added is that, I think you can go back to the framework. So part of why I wrote that was because I wanted to make sure that got back into the conversation and became part of the documentation in terms of what is the position of the board.
Yeah.
But even when I drafted that, understanding, I think there were some things that we're just trying to stay consistent with past actions we've done. So with other documents, with the zoning framework that was adopted by the board, with past resolutions that we've done for other places. That's why you saw language like, yeah, we don't want a whole bunch of market influx, come, because we know what happens with that. To that extent, presented to the board, it fleshes it out, it preserved the no, and even the original conditions that were there. That was
Change
part
the
of-
no to no.
Thank you, Ms.
to
Boyd, thank you,
conditions.
Ms. Boyd, thank you.
So it's
So,
not
thank you,
preserved
Ms.
the
Boyd,
no.
thank you, Ms. Boyd. So, that was going to be presented, and that was going to be presented to the board for them to decide what else happens. And I think that's exactly what happened. It was a hard conversation, but the whole point of the conversation was to figure out what is missing from this. And even to the point, if you didn't like something, what is the line you want to strike, because it really misrepresents what we want to do, and it's really contrary to what we wanted to do. So that is the hard process. And I want to be very clear. For all committees, we value the work that the committees do, because this is something that is impossible to do with the board member with 48 to 50 members sitting there. So we really need the committees to do this homework, to do this, and we respect that. But with that being said, ultimately is the purview of the board to adopt what that final position is. And you know what? And sometimes there are people who can't come there, but you know what? They have other perspectives that, yeah, we might want to hear that, and something that should be captured as part of that. So I presented the original one, and exactly what was supposed to happen is people looked at it and said, you know what? Change this line, add this line. And that ended up being what was presented. It was, again, moved by a separate member of the board, seconded by a second member of the board. We took the speakers list, and there were amendments, and tell me if I'm wrong, there were amendments and changes made to even that document after that.
There were many amendments made.
Correct.
Many board
But
members.
the
And-
vote
and then- hold on.
changed,
So
the
just-
vote
just-
changed
just
from a
make
no to a no with conditions. That's the issue.
And
That's
part of it
really
is the no
important.
with
With all
conditions.
of that wherefore, with
okay,
wherefore, wherefore.
I am not finished.
No,
But thank you, Ms.
with
Boyd.
no with
I am not
conditions,
finished, Ms.
it
Boyd.
changed.
So yes, so
And
that
you
is
did
the
not
reason
explain
why,
that to
that
the
is the
board.
reason, so yes, that is the reason why we went that direction, and that is the reason why it came to that. Because the disapproval is on the record, it is disapproved. And as part of the conditions, we put everything that's in there because, again, we don't think there's enough affordability. Two, we were very specific in terms of what we think the FAR should be for this, whatever the space is. Three, we were very clear, consistent with all of our past decisions in terms of, yeah, we don't want you skyscrapers that are there blocking up the signs for everything. And we even went to, and I believe Ms. Westerdahl, you even offered an amendment where it's like, we listed all the places that we thought were gonna be out.
Shadows.
That's fine.
And we included all that. So what I'm saying is, I don't think that it's fair to characterize that this is a complete departure from what the committee said. They said yes, and we went totally the opposite direction. I think there's some nuance that was added to it, and that is the purview of the board, and that becomes, hold on a second. And that is the conversation that we need to be able to take when we address other people as well.
Yeah.
So tomorrow, when we have the conversation with the borough presidents, when there's a hearing, we can go there and say, listen, these are the 5 or 6 things, not even just no, but these are the other issues that we consistently have. And as a board, we need to be able to be consistent in terms of the issues we have with these things. We're not a board that says no just because we just want to say no.
Exactly.
We are a board that says no because these are consistent issues we have with all these
But
developments.
yours is
But
not
it's
a
not a
no.
condition,
And
it's an
that is what is
explanation.
reflected in the document.
The
And I respectfully
condition
disagree.
makes a difference.
And I
It's an
respectfully
explanation.
disagree. Thank you.
It
I'm
makes
sorry,
a
Madam
difference.
Chair.
So
Thank
when
you
it
very
gets to city planning, what is it gonna reflect in city planning?
That's
It's
not
this
City
approval.
planning.
No, it
Disapprove.
says
No, it's
yes
gonna
Hold on,
with
hold on.
Yes,
And let me be very
There's
clear.
only
Hold
3
on. And let me be
conditions.
very clear. Let me be very clear.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
My responsibility as chair is to make sure that I communicate exactly that.
Yeah, well,
For
it's
all these
already-
last rezoning applications, I go to all these meetings. I don't send something in, I don't telegraph it in, I go in there and I explain it directly to every commission. I went to the board, I go to Borough Hall, I explain it there.
It's on
I go to
record.
DCP and I explain it there as well.
But what's the system gonna show?
This isn't gonna show a disapproval.
No, it's
No.
gonna show
It
that
is
it
going to
has
show a
conditions.
disapproval.
I just wanna
And my
ask a
testimony is going to
question.
reflect
Can I
a
ask a
disapproval.
That's how it
question?
Thank you.
works.
Doesn't
City
history
charter.
repeat itself? Because didn't you all say that the same situation happened with the armory?
Yes.
And then it happened?
Yes.
So then it's
Right.
quite evident that if we did it before with the no in conditions, it still went the side of doing
Yes,
what we did
yes,
not
with
wanna do.
conditions.
So if we put a no, and there is a section where I understand is no with an explanation, it's a steady no. I mean, I don't
But
understand
yeah.
why we going back and forth, because history repeated itself.
Thank
It
you.
already happened. We have a perfect example. I can see if we did not have an example, or it never happened, or this, let's just see what happened. We see what happened when we put no with explanation.
Okay.
The latter happened. So,
Sure.
right, so that's what I'm trying to understand, like, why would you put a no with
Why are you
conditions?
giving a city council person wiggle room? We said no.
Okay, Cheryl, I'm gonna respectfully disagree with the people who say it makes such a big difference to say no with conditions versus no with explanation.
Then you wouldn't be so fighting for hard.
Let
for
me
no
finish,
conditions.
Alicia!
Then you
I
wouldn't be
let
fighting
you
so
finish
hard
and you
for no with
constantly
conditions.
interrupt.
If it wasn't important,
So
then you
let
wouldn't
me,
change it.
so let
would
me
you?
finish.
If it was not so
I s-
important,
so
you
let
wouldn't change
me-
it. So change it back. If it's not so important, change it back. Why don't you put a motion on the floor on the ULURP committee to sit there and tell the community board to change it back to a no? If it's not so important, change it back to a no.
What was it?
If it's not so important. Because it is important. You know it and Fred knows it. You play games with people. You can't play games with me, Suki. Because I know the law. I know the law.
Let's have no with explanations then.
Put a motion on the floor to change it back.
I make a
Put a motion on
I'm not
the
done
floor
with
to
my
change it back.
comments.
Put a
I'm not
motion
done
on
with-
the floor.
I am not done with my comments.
Tired of people
We
talking about how it's
We
not so
voted,
important.
we
And then they fight
voted,
for
we
it.
voted a straight no on the Franklin Avenue, 962 Franklin Avenue rezoning. The borough president also voted a straight no on the 962 Franklin Avenue rezoning. However, he attached a resolution that suggested a smaller upzoning. Ultimately, the City Planning Commission recommended an upzoning that was one step above the borough president's upzoning, and the council member voted for that zoning with a higher AMI level, with not as great affordability, but with some small modifications to the design, which really didn't cost the developer anything. So my point is that when they have in their minds what they want to do and what they're going to support, it doesn't matter whether or not we voted no. In fact, I think the borough president's no was somewhat disingenuous because his resolution very clearly indicated that he was a yes with conditions. This is all semantics.
He didn't
What
vote
you
like
guys
that. He
should
voted a
focus
no.
on
Yeah,
is
vote.
whether or not the conditions reflected what you actually wanted.
We want the record to reflect what happens in this
The
committee.
vote was a no
Max has
with
his
an
hand up and
explanation.
Esteban has a motion.
If it doesn't matter, it wouldn't be
What
a
about
choice.
Esteban's motion?
I think we're talking in circles a little bit. It might be helpful to vote on Esteban's motion, where we can at least acknowledge that like maybe we should just do a better job in the future, just trying to put verbatim what the committee has voted on, and like maybe there are ways to like.
It happened.
No, it did
No,
not
no,
happen.
it's
No, it
exactly
did
what
not.
was put in
No,
front of the
no. You put no
The
with
committee
conditions.
recommendation went exactly.
No,
in front of
it,
the-
The
There were
committee
some-
recommendation
if I didn't, if I didn't,
Exactly.
it was presented,
Yes.
but it was mumbled, presented, and oh, we have this other more detailed document, and let's read this referendum. And of course, people are like, oh, no, oh yeah, this talks about affordable housing. Yeah, let's go with
No,
this.
my
You
boy's
never
smarter
talked
than
about
that.
why, but
My
you never
boy's smarter
talked
than
about
that.
why you're making a
My boy's
change.
smarter than that.
You never talked about why you're changing the vote from no to no with conditions.
We did discuss the reason why, because there's a reason why
Why?
our no is not just a no. Our no is a no because of
Explanation.
Gene's explanation thing.
Exactly,
there's
and
no
so
such-
upload the document
I don't
and
mean
say
to
no,
interrupt
that's
you
what
guys.
we
no such box.
I don't mean to
Says no with
interrupt you
explanation.
guys.
There is
I
a
don't mean to
no
interrupt
box,
you guys.
and then you upload
I don't mean
your
to in-
supporting document.
I don't mean to
And there's
interrupt
Those are
you.
your explanations.
Excuse me,
Those are
sorry.
your explanations.
I don't mean to interrupt.
Sorry.
Let's
Yeah.
vote. Let's let
Yeah.
you guys vote.
Well,
Can
we already
we-
It's time for
second,
that.
as somebody has to
what,
second.
what, what's the motion? Can you
Okay.
please
The
put
motion
that
Your
is-
motion, please.
The motion is that what we come up in this committee and what we vote on in this committee be presented as the committee verbatim, and that be presented as the main thing that's being voted on. If somebody else wants to add something, fine, but this is what we're voting on when, the board is voting on when they vote.
And I did second it, and I did second it when he said
Okay,
it.
seconded by Cheryl. Can we call the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
But
Okay,
first, there's any
so the motion
discussion.
passes. Okay, so.
So
I am very
what is the
happy
language of
moving
this
on.
motion? Because I need to hear the language of this motion.
Esteban, why don't you write it for us?
Please, please, we need to know the language of this motion because we know how motions get changed as well.
Okay, so I am pleased to hear that people want to discuss the zoning framework. We always said that this was not final and that it needed to be added to. In particular, it does not say anything about affordability and what kind of housing we need. It speaks specifically to heights and densities because that's what I thought that we could handle at that time. So
But I
On
thought
the
that was the
agenda.
housing committee's job.
So on the agenda, it is the housing committee's job, working together
So why are you
with
taking
us,
over the
because
housing
it is
committee's job?
Because it is a joint, it is a joint decision. How
A
much
joint
new
decision on a housing committee that
how
hasn't
much
met
new
yet?
how much new housing can be created depends on what kind of zoning there is. So that's what we have on the agenda for tonight. And I'm happy that people are here who are interested in discussing it. So at the last meeting, we had decided to break up into groups by quadrant.
Are we timing this,
Yes,
How much?
give me 5 minutes to just go over this. And so we broke up into teams by quadrant. I think Nicola, Tara, and Esteban were gonna deal with the northwest quadrant, which is north of Empire and west of New York Avenue. John and Cheryl were gonna look at the southeast quadrant, which is east of New York Avenue and south of Empire Boulevard. Myself and Max were gonna look at the southwest quadrant, south of Empire Boulevard and west of New York Avenue. And I think Hector and Joshua, neither of whom is here tonight, were gonna work on the northeast quadrant. And Yaakov and Yisrael had not volunteered to work on anything. So what we had agreed to do was to look at, first of all, how much housing has been permitted in those areas. In other words, that they have full permission to proceed, but it's not built yet, it's not occupied yet. How much housing could be built as of right based on the current zoning, because we have a lot of underbuilt sites in the district relative to the current zoning. Some of that is okay, some of that is not good because it means the demolition of large numbers of existing buildings. But in any case, for you all to understand what is the potential for new housing to be built in the district. And third, how much housing do you all actually think needs to be built given the present and possible future population in the district? And how much of that do you want to be affordable at various income levels? Esteban had talked about looking for opportunities for preservation. So we agreed to do all of that. I also said that I would give some guidance on how you could calculate the as of right
What are you
zoning
supposed to be doing with all
potential.
this data, if you don't mind me asking?
Let me finish this and then we can go to questions. This is pursuant to the city council's law that was passed in 2021, their fair housing framework, which was gonna have HPD set housing targets for every district, beginning in 2025. So I think it's important for us to get ahead of that and talk about what we as a district believe that we need.
But they already did that with the city of Jazz.
They didn't. That was the mayor's plan. This is the city council's plan, which they have not come out with yet. They're expecting HPD to do this in 2025.
You wanna do HPD's
So
job?
I'd like to give, well, it's our job. I wanted to give some guidance on how you guys can calculate the as of right zoning potential in your quadrants. So I sent out an email to the committee members. Have any of you had a chance to look at this? I know I sent it out basically like yesterday.
You talked about the building on President Street, right? And you gave that as an
Yes.
example, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I read it.
Okay, so did anybody have any questions or comments?
Finish.
Okay,
You said questions,
questions or comments?
or did it in regards to this new stage you're going into or the last discussion?
Yeah, in regards to this part that we're talking about here, that's the housing targets.
And how does the housing committee fit in all this? Because you're talking about affordable housing, shouldn't the housing committee be actually doing this? It is a part of, supposed to be the housing committee's job. So why are you doing housing when this is land use?
Because what we're doing is trying to figure out what the as of right potential for housing units is based on the current zoning, right? We're supposed to be the people that understand zoning, so I don't know that anybody else is gonna do this.
And what are you supposed to do with this data?
Well, let's find out what the data is and then we'll decide what to do with it.
So you just wanna go ahead and just do it, just because you wanna do it, and you don't really know what you wanna do with it. You want people to do all this work and then do it, to
We're
do it for
working
what?
on this, so we're working on this zoning framework, but we can't do any work without information. I mean, what do you, with nothing, what do you want us to say?
With
So are
zoning
there any,
framework?
does anybody have any questions for the committee?
That is the question.
I definitely need more time to
Yeah.
to look. I mean, I think there's interesting things in here, but like,
Okay.
I wanna, yeah, it's very deep, and I wanna, if we're gonna actually do this and,
Units
And
of,
what are we gonna do with the information?
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
what,
it.
how are we gonna, who are we gonna present it to? What is the purpose of it?
Okay, Miss,
Yes.
what's your name?
okay.
Okay.
So I'm gonna start with my comment and then I'll go into my question. I'm thankful for y'all allowing me to be a participant here today. I'm gonna get straight into it for the sake of time. Every time Alicia mentions something is dismissed by you, I'm understanding you're the chair here. And then when somebody else reiterates the same thing is accepted, and that's very unacceptable and it's non-productive. Now my question, because even I'm getting confused, and so when we're saying our board is smarter than that, but then you're saying you provide information based on what can be handled is a severe contradiction. And I'm here myself, I'm a young person, I feel like my memory is pretty sharp and I'm getting confused even currently. So my question ties into a question I wanted to ask earlier when she mentioned, were they informed of the rezoning? And you mentioned stories, heights. To my understanding, rezoning is more of determining commercial properties or residential. And I understand you can indicate AMIs, affordability, and specificities thereon afterwards. So my question is, I need clarification since you just said you as a committee have the understanding of zoning, y'all are zoning people. So in this situation, what will the zoning be for in this data that you'll be reading? And since they need more time, I was gonna wait till I heard information to ask my question. But since they need more time, is the as of rights that you mentioned, I'm assuming you mean those same AMIs or things that we would like to see or are demanding? What would those even prospectively be? Because I'm confused, there's a lot of general blank terminology being used, and then afterwards it's going into specifics, which is why, like I said, I was gonna wait for the data to be read. So I know I said a lot, so just to consolidate, when she mentioned the rezoning where they informed and you mentioned stories, was that still appropriate to that question, or did that not address the zoning?
Yes, it is. So those are actually very good questions. Zoning determines two things. It determines the use of the property, various types of commercial, residential, community facility, etc. And it also determines the size of the building. So the size of the building is the number of stories, but it's also what we call the bulk, right? So a building can take up more of the lot, it can take up less of the lot, right? You can have a building that's very tall and skinny. You can have a building that's shorter, but is just very, large, it's very bulky. Zoning determines all of those things. It determines how far it's set back from the street, how much space there is between buildings, how much parking there is, and it can also set requirements for affordability, but it doesn't have to. So it actually does determine all of those things, and so yes, it plays a big role in determining how much new housing can be built. It does, so that's why this is something that we should work on jointly with the housing committee. They're not here tonight, I cannot answer for them, all I can do is say that we're here and we need to look at this.
And the as of rights was my second question.
Okay,
So
and the
this
as of
data,
right,
we were
okay,
just about to read,
yes.
can you just reiterate what this data is for?
Yes,
And then what those as of rights are, and if, I understand you said you don't have the other information as of now, but you do need to start addressing constituents' concern, and somebody part of your board also reiterated it and regurgitated it, what will it be utilized for? If you
Yeah.
can answer that.
So as of right means what the current zoning allows. So zoning is always set by government at some time. Our zoning was last set in 1961. Many communities have been rezoned at some later point, the 80s, 90s, 2000s, whatever, some 5-10 years ago. So the as of right in our district is based on the zoning that was set in 1961. What we're doing when we go through each lot, is we're looking at the size of the lot and based on the size of the lot, there is a number assigned to each zone. The zoning map shows you what can be built in the particular area that is covered by that zone. So there'll be like a little like shape that's covered,
Yeah,
that's
that-
R6 or something,
yeah.
right? And so there's a number assigned to each zone called the floor area ratio. That number times the lot area is the number of square feet that can be built. So like a typical, I don't know whether you live in a house or an apartment building, typical house lot is 2,000 square feet, it's 20 by 100. If the floor area ratio is 2, you can build a total of 4,000 square feet. If it's 3, you can build a total of 6,000. If it's 4, you can build a total of 8,000. If it's 1, you can only build 2,000. There are buildings that are larger than the floor area ratio would permit because they were built in, 1890 when there was no zoning. There are many buildings in our district that are far below what the floor area ratio would permit. Fred, is there
No, when you're done.
say? So what we would do with this information is we're trying to determine how much the current zoning actually allows us to build, because the current zoning allows actually a tremendous amount of development, because there are a lot of smaller buildings where you could build a lot more than what's there right now. So if we're trying, if the city has housing targets, if we think that more housing needs to be built based on potential population growth, how much new housing actually needs to be built versus how much could be built? Because I think most of us are aware, who have been on the committee for a while, have discussed in the past and are aware that there's several times more housing that could be built than what we would probably need based on population growth. So that's kind of where we're going with that. We want to understand, how much more is out there than what we really want or need. But on the other hand, it's not uniform from quadrant to quadrant, right? There are particular areas where very little, although overall there's a lot more that can be built in the district than what's here now, there are particular areas where it's the opposite. And where in fact they're coming to us and saying our community is growing very rapidly. So that's one of the reasons why I'm asking people to split up by quadrant, because even though there is an overall picture, there's a slightly different picture in certain quadrants.
And to figure that out, like you said, those are the as of rights.
Yes.
What could be versus what needs to be, but maybe what could be.
Yes. And then also, if we do want to require affordable housing in some places, where do we do that?
And
How do we do that? There, if we use the mandatory inclusionary housing, there is a trade-off. That usually does imply increasing the amount that can be built. Do we want to make that trade-off? Are there other ways besides increasing the zoning that we can encourage affordable housing, that we can get affordable housing, right? And that would actually be the housing committee's job, not ours. We can only look at the zoning side of things.
Which is like a really good point, because I'm like going back through my board meeting. Where is the housing committee?
Protesting. They are
Not
boycotting.
here.
They are boycotting the housing committee. The housing committee is boycotting. They're boycotting because there's a refusal to elect a chair of the housing committee, an independent chair, not Fred, but an independent person, and for them to actually work on housing issues and not be a cover for the land use committee. The housing, since September, they have been boycotting the housing committee. The housing committee is completely dysfunctional. It has not had a meeting yet. And we are now. Fred refuses to appoint a chair of the committee. They do not want Fred as the chair of the committee. And as long as he shows up and he wants to be the chair, they will not be showing up. And they have made that very clear by their refusal to show up. One person showed up to the housing committee this month. One person showed up to the housing committee last month. 10 people showed up in September. When Fred removed the chair resigned, he decided to be the chair, and now they are now boycotting. We do not have.
I don't, hold on, before you answer, because I just don't want this to be the thing that happens. If that is true, could you just give okay, can you just give clarity as to, okay, I said okay. Could you just give clarity as to why there is not a chair appointed to the housing committee and what's going on?
The former chair resigned for personal reasons,
Oh, I didn't know that.
because you never asked.
Hold on, oh, answer, I would just love an answer.
Understood. So, the chair resigned for personal reasons, so no one was fired, first of all. I wanna make sure we're gonna clear the air with this. I think what you're seeing at the housing committee is the same thing you saw at the December meeting, where people get too busy or they don't wanna make the commitment, and you see it at a number of other committees where you can probably point around and their names that get called out, and you have never seen them before. So the conversation we are having, that I'm having with the office staff, we are going to have to do something in terms of revitalizing, and that might mean some people may not be there anymore on that list. So it is something that is definitely recognized, and it's something we are definitely taking seriously. And I don't want to set somebody up for a failure, where I want to make sure we're able to get people in a room. First of all, make sure we can get people in a room so that way you can have a committee to chair, and kind of set the priorities, and give them a mission. And at that point, we can have conversations about who is able to take that on, if there is a veteran member who's willing to take that on, or sometimes, guess what, we go on the youth route and we support them as well. But that's where we are with those conversations, trying to figure out who is there, what the other issues are, and how we're gonna proceed from there.
Is that gonna be presented to the board at large to see if there's input
Cheryl,
from the board?
point of order.
We need to go on with the ULURP.
Can I make one quick comment? I just wanna say that the housing committee, the first meeting, they were combined with the ULURP committee without notification. They were just combined in here, and a lot of them were very surprised. I talked with them separately. They did not wanna be, the housing and the ULURP committee combined doesn't make sense. This room isn't big enough, it's too much. It's overwhelming. They should have met separately, got their committee together, got their chair, but Fred didn't do that, and somehow they were combined with us, and it created a lot of chaos and a lot of bad feelings from what I heard. So it's very sad what happened with the housing committee, and I think they should have never been combined with us.
It
Combining,
should be brought up in a general.
yeah, it's pretty
That's what I was
awful.
stating before you cut
You
me
know,
off,
so-
I just
and
wanna
that
highlight that.
committee-
I don't, guys, I don't think it's
It's
really
just, but,
appropriate for
it's-
the ULURP committee to be discussing this. If you wanna bring this
Well,
up at
you're discussing
executive or
housing.
general.
I know,
board.
it's
They're
just like
supposed
there's
to
so
be with
much to
us,
know.
you know, I think they met separately and then
Have
we
to
got
go.
together, we'd be fine, but that's not what happened. It's just between them. So,
Okay, so we're discussing how zoning affects how much housing can be built. And we can CC it to the members of the housing committee that we know, and that's all we can do. Okay, so, do we wanna go over, just maybe one more example to see how these?
No.
Maybe table this discussion, I
No.
think for now, might be valuable.
Okay,
I think that this was sent out a little bit late. I think there's a little bit of like frustration from the prior discussion. So maybe we move on to the next agenda item, might be best for people's spirits.
Okay, sorry, before y'all keep moving on really fast, I'm starting to get really confused, it's starting to get really disorganized, a lot of things are getting tabled, and from my understanding, this is what led to the conflict in the last situation where it ran out of time, people gotta go, people leaving, personal, it's not functional for people trying to actually get information. So if this is ignorantly or inappropriately mentioned, you could inform me of such, but I just wanted to ask, can you initiate a motion or write on the record to reflect that we need to situate the housing situation instead of just putting things on the table? That way we're in preparation for the next meeting. As well as I heard Ms. Alicia mention that they requested for an independent person to be assigned, not to go back or too intricately into that. But I just want those things to be reflected because I believe they're necessary. Because I'm getting confused, my question in with this, because I remember the last thing you mentioned was we can consider affordable housing and what that would look like. but that's housing, and this is ULURP. So I need to understand if that will still be appropriate to be discussed when we discuss this at a later time. And if so, that leads to my second question that I would propose at that time is that should be now reconsidered what would be affordable housing. Because we're keep fighting on this same affordable housing that's never affordable. So even that language would need to be changed. And I don't wanna make a further confusion if it's supposed to be done with housing, then we shouldn't be talking about it here at all then. Because you're saying we would CC them, but that's inappropriate as well, because their whole
We
committee.
actually haven't gotten to the point of discussing anything like, do we wanna set an AMI target at all, although we always discuss that with individual ULURP applications. Right now, we're just talking about how much housing of any kind can be built under the as-of-right zoning. And the as-of-right zoning mostly does not require affordable housing, although we do, I do want us to be aware that there was a prior rezoning on Franklin Avenue, for two 17-story buildings where there are hundreds of units of MIH income restricted housing coming up. I don't know whether it was 60% or 80% of AMI. My guess is it was centered around 80%, right, Fred? But as well as several hundred units of 100% affordable housing, mostly low-income and supportive housing through Vital Brooklyn, which was a non-ULURP application. They were state-owned properties. So this is the kind of information that we can communicate to other board members so that they're aware of what housing is coming and what could potentially come. And we can all then decide what to do about it. I mean, we're land use and we're ULURP, which is a very specific process, but it's also planning, right? So that's understanding what generates the need for housing, which is population growth, right? So one of the things that we talked about at the last meeting was what are some of the demographic predictions for how much population is growing. It's not something that you pull out of a hat. I mean, you actually look at, you know, like how many kids people are having and like who's moving out, who's moving in, you know, what the trends are. And the trend in our district overall has been that we're actually losing population. But we have members who are saying, in my specific neighborhood, in my specific community, it's growing very rapidly. And so that's the kind of information that board members, as community members, can bring to us, right? The other thing I was talking about was in terms of what kind of housing is available, right? I mean, we all, and city planning and developers can do this too, look at Street Easy and see what's online. And so one thing that's evident to me is that there are big differences among the different quadrants in what's available. We have 64
Again,
apartments
that's
for
housing,
rent.
isn't this information from housing?
But I want us, this was brought up in a ULURP committee where somebody from the public said that, you know, we talked about the fact that a lot of our existing housing is affordable between 50 and 80% of AMI, and that came from the city's equitable development data score. And this person said, well, this housing is not available. And so one of the things that's evident when, you know, looking at the listings that are out there on Street Easy is that there's a ton of listings in the southwest and the northwest, 64 in Prospect Clifford's Gardens, 54 in Crown Heights West, but 18 in Crown Heights east of New York Avenue and 26 in Wingate east of New York Avenue. So the picture is actually very different in different quadrants, and that same pattern is repeated in terms of units for sale. And it's very much connected to the zoning. If you look at the zoning in the northeast quadrant, it's mostly single family, two family, right? They don't have a lot of multifamily zoning. Crown Heights West has mostly multifamily zoning, and they've had a lot of upzonings, the Franklin Avenue upzonings, for example. Prospect Clifford's Gardens has a lot of multifamily zoning. Wingate has a big area that's occupied by the hospital where there's no housing going on. They do have the multifamily zoning, that's why you're seeing some of that extra development there. And you should also keep in mind that Vital Brooklyn is going to bring several hundred, if not thousands of units, but it's gonna take a while. It's probably not coming until 2027, 28, 29, maybe. So these are all things to keep in mind when we think about how much housing we actually need, right? Because people, you know, don't really think about like, oh, how many people are being born and what percentage is the population growing. They think about what's available to me right now. And so I think this is being very acutely, the lack of availability is being very acutely felt in the northeast section of the community, and that is connected to zoning. So that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, so step one, review the document.
Yes.
Is there a template that you want people to fill out? Or how are we supposed to relay the information that we're capturing?
So I think I sent out an email with a list of things that I wanted each of the teams to come up with.
Okay.
And I'll try to come up with
Because this is gonna be an iterative process, I'm assuming.
It
Yeah.
sounds like a
One-
study, personally.
I'll come
Right,
up with
and that's what I'm concerned about, what's happening with this data. I'm fine with doing as of right, so we have an understanding of where we stand.
Yeah.
I'm not, you know,
So-
affordability and all that, you know.
So-
I just don't want what's happened before to happen again with information that we collect is suddenly transformed into something else.
Into
So
a
I'll-
study
I'll
that then
come
gets
up with,
presented.
I'll come up with a spreadsheet for you guys with formulas so that you can, you know, like I said, obviously you can't do this by hand for every zoning law in the district. There's just thousands, there's like 6,000. So the way that I did it in the past was I downloaded all of the data in bulk from the city's public databases. But just so that you guys have a feel for this and, you know, you feel it, you know, I mean, we've talked about the numbers before when we were talking about City of Yes, but just so that all of you guys have a feel for this, you should do this by hand for like a couple of blocks. And I'll send out a spreadsheet to help you with formulas to help you do that. Yeah, so come up with the as of right numbers and start thinking, you know, like I said, about what you think the housing targets should be.
Let's not get into that. Right now, let's just do as of right. Let's just try and get our heads around, what are we dealing with? Where, as you said, where we have a lot of multifamily, where do we have single family? I'm fine with understanding our community and our quadrants. Starting to pontificate and come up with, that's the next step. Let us get our arms around where we are.
Fair
That's
enough,
step one.
fair enough. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to suggest to you all is in addition to the 4 quadrants, that we have another team to deal specifically with the commercial areas, because that's a whole different level of complexity. We have the C82 on Empire, we have a C82 on Utica, and we have an M1 on Clarkson. So the commercial zoning, like I said, has a different set of rules.
But it's all commercials, it has nothing to do with residential.
And so if you guys wanna understand that and you wanna work on
Understand that it's
it,
all commercials?
if you guys wanna understand what the commercial rules are, and there was a lot of discussion in both the
We
board
already
meeting.
did
There
a
was a
study
lot of
about
discussion
that.
both amongst this committee and in the general board meeting about specific things that people wanted to see, specific types of businesses, specific types of requirements, affordability, et cetera.
There's no
Parking.
affordability on the
People-
commercials.
Right,
People
right now,
have-
we're doing as of right. We're not trying to decide you want us
That
to
can-
design a
that
future.
can
Let's do
ultimately-
as of right.
That can be the decision
She's trying
that
to
you
do a
make,
study.
Nicola. That can be a
She's
decision
trying to
that
do a
you
study.
make.
No, I'm saying, I thought step one was let us understand our community. I thought that's what we were trying to do.
Exactly, and
And
so
so
my
let's understand our
suggestion to you, and
community
so
and
my
where the
suggestion
commercial
to
zones are.
you, my suggestion to you is that you create another team working with economic development, you know, I can reach
Okay,
out.
this is too much, so come on now, let's back it up.
That's not what
Let's
you
back it
said.
up. If economic development wants to understand where our commercial zones are and what they would like to have happen in it, then they can do that.
I think this is a really great starting point. I think we're aligned that maybe this is just where we start for now. And then like over time, we can have a conversation about doing other things. But I think at least just this is good for
This is
now.
good for now. And if economic development has ideas and passionate about where they wanna see what types of
Yeah.
stores, they have the same
Well,
access
that's
to the
because
same
the
mass, and they can do
CA2s are
it.
being targeted, right? Suki on Empire Boulevard, let's do a study of that, let's see where that's going. So then we can propose it as a rezoning application, so we can have affordable housing, and we can get the 20 stories and 30 stories apartment
Okay,
buildings
I
on
think
the
that's
CA2s.
something that should have been
Oh,
evident to you
no.
guys based on
Oh,
this.
yes.
Something that should have been evident to you guys based on this discussion about 7399 Empire is that there are many different types of commercial zoning. I don't know if you wanna
A
speak to this at all,
CA2
John.
is a commercial
But
zone that allows everything.
CA2 is not the only commercial zone out
Exactly, but
there.
it is what's
And
on
you-
Empire.
And
Okay, can we
Can we
get that
table-
discussion for future?
Yeah.
Right now, we're just
Table.
trying to understand as of right.
Can we table this agenda item and then Suki, you can circulate a spreadsheet for us to start filling in data points. I think this is a really good exercise for building people's knowledge, but I think we've had our fill of discussion on this one
Yeah.
maybe.
As of right,
So
we're
We
gonna
have
do
to,
that.
we have to
Right.
understand our current state, let's understand current
Yeah.
state, that's all we're doing right now.
All right.
And we did that a little bit for City of Yes already, so I think we can do that.
yes, I certainly hope you guys can handle that.
Woo!
It's
She
not
thinks
kind of
she's
backhanded.
not sure if you guys
Come
can
on.
handle it. Go ahead, Suki, go ahead with your
So
concept.
let's move on to our final agenda.
And sure you guys can handle
Yeah,
Handle
condescending, yes, Suki is the only smart one in the room, go ahead.
So Cheryl, are we moving on to our next agenda item?
I think we're done.
Should we not be,
Okay,
Closing off?
so electing a vice chair. Does anybody want to nominate themselves? And let me just say the role of vice chair,
How many minutes? 3?
3.
let's give it 6 minutes, we have until 9 o'clock. So the role of vice chair is to run the meetings when I'm not here, which I practically never am. Or if I can't chair the meeting because I'm putting a motion on the floor. It's not a co-chair position, it's not chair in waiting. Some of you might remember I was actually secretary before I became chair. I'm also gonna open the floor if anybody wants to volunteer to be secretary.
Do we need to wait until we have more board
Yeah.
members? Because you need board
It has to-
members
has to
for
be a
these
board member, right?
positions.
It does have to be a
And I-
board
Yeah.
member,
So it could only be Max or I right now.
Right.
so
I think we need to wait till we have more board members.
do you guys want to?
No.
Teresa, do you want us to do the election now? Do you wanna nominate yourself?
Maybe we can wait till the broader group
I
of
do
people
it,
is
but
here.
I'd rather have, if somebody else wants to do it.
I mean, we
But
have
I'll do
quorum
it.
right now.
Right, but we only have 6 people, it's the bare minimum, so
And
we
you
wait till
only
we have
have
11
two board
people.
members that would be that would
Yeah.
be able to
There could
run.
be Yakov or,
Joshua.
Joshua.
I heard that Yakov was resigning from the committee because he didn't like the way Suki and Fred were behaving themselves at the last general.
Maybe we
board
table the board vice chair discussion for the next meeting as well.
Did anybody
yeah.
else
meeting.
resign?
Is it true?
I'm
Did he
asking you.
resign? That
Did
is a
anybody
question.
resign?
Did he resign?
You said I didn't ask you before, so did anybody resign?
I
Who's
said you
resigned?
couldn't what?
Jakov, did he resign?
When I asked about the
Jakov.
housing chair, I said I didn't know the housing chair resigned, and you said I never asked, so I'm asking you now, has anybody else resigned?
There's only 1 or 2 other members who have resigned, and there were, only 1 or 2 other members who resigned.
Who resigned?
Let me see, I'd have to double check, I think, Doyen Saab resigned, and I wanna say there's one more, but I can't recall. So it's either 47, 48 members,
So there's no recent resignations.
nobody else, as far as.
So can we table this discussion maybe for the next meeting around electing a board chair and we have a
We
broader
should have
group?
done it at the first meeting, actually.
Mm.
It's a little late in the game. January.
Okay,
I
so
think we
are we agreed that we're gonna table the election of the vice chair until
Yeah.
next meeting?
Yes.
So yeah.
Greater representation of the board members.
Okay,
And it should
I
be
looked my
first.
motion out, by the way, just says,
okay,
the ULURP committee's resolution as voted upon by the committee will be presented verbatim as the official recommendation to the community board 9.
okay, that's fine. Okay, so do I have do we have any other business? Okay, so do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Alright, thank you, everybody.
Trying to get y'all to work.
Excuse me, guys, sorry.
I'm fine with understanding my community.